Hey, Flatirons, it's Pastor Jim here, and beside me are two of my great friends from Flatirons, James and Aaron Henderson. Kate and Caleb are down there too, their kids, and they run a ministry called Oshtray, which a lot of us have been down and are familiar with. Hey, we just wanted to check in on you guys. First of all, in a nutshell, tell us what Oshtray is all about, what the heart of it is, and then we'll kind of see what God's doing now. So take it away.
Hey, everybody. Oshtray is a center for spiritual formation just in the heart of Mexico City. From Oshtray, we create a quiet place where people can find spiritual renewal through group and personal retreats, spiritual direction, and soul care. That's kind of the structure of Oshtray as a center for formation. But I think at the heart of it, the spirit of Oshtray is just deep friendship as we walk to God together and pay attention to what he's doing in our lives in his kingdom.
From personal experience, I can say a year ago today, I flew down to your house for all of those things, right? And it's a great place for healing too, getting to know God and then healing that brokenness inside of you. This seemed to go really well together, right? You guys been doing how long? How long have you been doing this?
Oshtray as a ministry has been formal for 5 years, but I mean, it's through what we've learned over the last 20 years of ministry in Mexico City. And like you're saying, I think God is deeply interested in deep healing and extensive transformation as we walk with him together. And that's what's at the heart of our show.
Yeah. Hey, I want to know what the last 3 months have been about, but I'm going to call this out in front of our church. Significant marker for Dr. James Henderson. You just received your PhD in spiritual formation. What was that? Yeah. And so, like, I don't have any doctor friends, so I feel like smarter just being with you guys.
I think we're all beginners, and that's how we should always see ourselves.
Right.
So, but thanks. It's a long journey that was done with a lot of friends and support.
Yeah, well, I'm proud of you. Hey, Aaron, tell me what the last 3 months have felt like, or what been different, as you're trying to do ministry and family during this whole lockdown, because it's certainly in Mexico City.
Yeah, well, I think like everyone in the world, we're staying at home and doing a lot of Zoom calls. We're trying to do all, as much of the ministry that we've always done, but virtual now, which has had some good benefits in that we can be in contact with people further away than what we usually are, not, I guess, less local and more widespread.
Mm-hmm.
Even as far away as from Spain.
Yeah, we've got a new group started in Spain
Costa
some of the
Rica.
people that we met when we went with you to Spain.
Right.
But anyway, kids are doing online school, so we're doing that. They're almost through. A couple more.
Sorry, phone went off.
So kids are doing online school. We're trying as a church, as a local church, and as an organization, just to help with economic needs as they come up. Like everywhere else in the world, lots of people have been laid off or aren't able to work, and we're trying to support the people on a small scale, just people that we know of that have needs, kind of like y'all are doing at Flatirons, helping with groceries or rent or medical bills.
Yeah. I was listening to a report that came out of Mexico City, is that we have a lot of systems in place, but Mexico City, especially some of the lower income areas, you don't work, you don't eat, right?
That's right.
And that's got to feel like that's a burden. That's hurting.
Yeah. 51% of Mexico lives in an informal economy that they just hand to mouth each day. And so we have a lot of suffering neighbors here right now. And it's like that, I think, across the world.
So related to that, specifically, how can we be praying for you, your family, and those in the ministry in Mexico City? I mean, it feels kind of helpless up here, but how can we be praying?
Yeah, I think especially for wisdom, we're not God, and we can't, one thing we've realized is we can't meet all the needs. We just can't do it. And so for God to lead us in knowing what's ours to do as an organization and our local church here, give us wisdom in knowing how to best help and how to be a voice of hope to the people around us.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're certainly a voice of hope not just the people around you down there, but up here in Colorado too. We miss you a lot. We love you. We are praying for you all the time, and we know that you're praying our direction too. Please greet your wonderful family and all my friends down there in Mexico City for us from Flatirons, okay?
Thank you.
Love y'all.
All right. Hey, Flatirons, let's worship together.
People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children, generations, of every nation, of kingdom come. So don't let your heart be in trouble. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth: God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh, oh. Is in his blood. Oh, Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, his kingdom come. So don't let your heart be in trouble. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth: God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh, 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 oh.
Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus.
Swing wide, so swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as is in his blood. Yes, Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, his kingdom come. A place called blessing, where the poor in spirit are welcome. There is a place called freedom, where the chains that bind us are broken. God, let your kingdom come on earth. It is a place where we belong. Hallelujah. The gates are open wide. Hallelujah. We are welcome inside the kingdom of the heavens, the kingdom of our God. Hallelujah. A place called justice, where every human is honored. There is a place called mercy, where all the guilty are pardoned. God, let your kingdom come on earth. It is the place where we belong. Hallelujah. The gates are open wide. Hallelujah. We are welcome inside the kingdom of the heavens, the kingdom of our God. Hallelujah. Come all you broken hearted, come find a healing hand. Come all who thirst and hunger, come in and have your fill. Come taste the living water, all that we're longing for. Come in and walk with Jesus, come in and sing hallelujah. The gates are open wide. Hallelujah. We are welcome inside the kingdom of the heavens, the kingdom of our God. Hallelujah. It is here. So come on, you broken hearted, come find a healing hand. Come all who thirst and hunger, come in and have your fill. Come taste the living water, all that we're longing for. Come in and walk with Jesus, come in and sing hallelujah. The gates are open wide. Hallelujah. We are welcome inside the kingdom of the heavens, the kingdom of our God. Hallelujah. It is here. grace holds that crown. Your grace holds me now. 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 Stand high and surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. So here I stand high and surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. Here I stand, high and surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. Here I stand, high and surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. Once I was broken, you loved my whole heart through. Sin has no hold on me, 'cause your grace holds me now. Healed and forgiven. Look where my chains are now. Death has no hold on me, 'cause your grace holds that crown. Your grace holds me now. 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 So good, so good. Hey, welcome back to Online Church. I got to tell you where I am right now. I'm with these awesome people in a room of 4,000 empty chairs, and I was just sitting down here while y'all were doing that, and I pray for the day when we're all back together. I get this email a lot, like, when is the church going to open? And let me just correct that, all right? A church never closed, all right? We can't meet together in buildings, but the church never closed. We're actually reaching more people now since this whole pandemic than we ever have before. But I get it. I understand what you're asking. It's like, but I want to be with my brothers and sisters. I want to be back with my community. And so when is that going to happen? The answer is as soon as possible. Again, we miss you. I know you miss. I ran to a lady at Home Depot today. He's like, thank you. Ran to a guy at the gym. He says, hey, we're listening. And I just want to thank you all for your ongoing support, even though we can't physically be together. Let me answer a couple questions. We don't have an exact date. Right now, the government has opened up that number that we have 50 people at one of our services, which counting all the band and the cameras and the sound, that's more than 50. There's not room for you. So anyway, as soon as possible. Here's what we're going to do, though, is that over the next month, we're going to really be trying to gear up and listen, not just to the government, but we're really listening to some other churches, like-minded churches kind of find themselves in the same kind of predicament. But we're also talking to a lot of medical professionals that we really do care and we trust, trying to make that wise decision. And so as that number maybe goes up or as the virus gets crazy or whatever,
we'll keep you informed of that every week from here and then all throughout the week on our social media. But so keep on tuning into that. And thanks for your patience and your prayers and your ongoing support. Hey, before I jump into today's talk, I want to just do a shameless plug. Next week we're going to start a new series. It's on the 23rd Psalm, and so two things on that. One is it's probably the most famous chapter in the Bible. If you have a few verses memorized, I bet some of those verses are the 23rd Psalm. So between now and next weekend, if you just maybe look at that or Google it or something like that and just kind of get that running in the background of your mind. We're going to do 4 weeks on the 23rd Psalm. I'm going to be teaching all 4 weeks. And here's the other thing I'm really, really excited about is that our team is all coming together. I'm going to be teaching the 23rd Psalm from up in the mountains, because it's really weird to talk about, he leads me beside still waters when you're in a big steel building. And so I'm going to be teaching that from beside still waters, and I'm going to be in valleys, and I'm going to be in green pastures. And so I'm really, really excited about it. Next week we kick that off, and my friend Tony is the best part about it. He has this thing in the middle. I love to say my talk is the best part about it, but it's not. Tony's part is the best part. Anyway. So I'm going to invite you back to that. Hey, before we jump into today, I want to pray, and then we'll go into the last weekend of this series. Will you pray with me? So God, I'm one of those weird people who actually believes that the kind of God you are, the kind of God that runs the universe, is the kind of God who has this ability to know just when we need to hear something from you, like the right season, the right moment. And I think for a lot of us, today might be that moment. And even if this message is shared a year from now or 2 years from now, that would be that person's right moment. And so, God, I'm going to ask you to do what only you can do, and that is, will you speak to each one of our hearts in that place in our heart that we really need to hear something from you today? We are listening. We're leaning in, and we want to know what you say is true about us, about you, and about life. So just teach us, all right? We love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Hey, so like I said, welcome back to this is the last message of a series of messages we've been calling Even Though, all right? As we've looked at this whole idea of faith, what faith is and what faith isn't, what faith looks like, what it doesn't look like, what it does, what it doesn't do, especially when there's tension between what we believe or claim to believe to be true about God and what he says is true and what he's telling us to do, even though we find ourselves or we're facing a really, really hard, scary, unknown circumstance, and then we don't see how what you're saying, God, would ever work out, right? Which is the hardest thing about faith when you think about it, right? See, you don't really need a lot of faith when everything in life makes sense, when it's logical and it just seems fair. But you're gonna need a lot of faith when life gets complicated. Like when circumstances and what God is telling you to do, it just doesn't make sense, or what he's telling you to do just doesn't seem possible. We want to talk about faith. So really, really quickly, let's review the 2 most important things you have to kind of have running in your head around this idea of faith. The first one goes like this. Faith is the assurance or the substance. It's that gut level, like, hey, my feet are planted on this rock and I'm not moving, all right? That. Faith is the assurance that Jesus is who he says he is. And the confidence, a conviction, like I just know that he will keep every promise he has made. Every promise, even though it hadn't happened yet, right? And you don't understand how it's gonna happen or when it's gonna happen. You just have faith and confidence in the one who said it was gonna happen, the one who made a promise. I believe. I don't know why. I just do. Second is this, faith always, right? Maybe underline always, faith always leads to action. We've looked at this over every week. Faith without action, the Bible said, is dead. In other words, how about this? Write this down, right? What we do reveals what we truly believe. See, it doesn't matter what you say you believe or you sing songs about or claim to believe. No, here's the thing, all right? If you really want to know what I believe is true and who and what I have put my trust in, just follow me around for a little while. Right? And just watch what I do, especially when I find myself in one of those even though type of circumstances. Which brings me to this last character in this Hall of Fame list of men and women that we find in this one chapter in the Bible. It's called the book of Hebrews. It's almost at the end of the Bible, but we've been unpacking this one list in the Bible, and everything that they did, they made it into this chapter because of their level of faith or confidence or trust in God. Because of that, they all stepped out. They did something. They acted, they obeyed, they risked something, they risked everything believing, having faith that God was behind it and would keep his promise to make what looked like impossible things actually become possible. So this last character that we're going to unpack today, I'm going to be honest, he's maybe one of my Jesus is at the top of the list, but one of my most favorite people in the whole Bible. His name is Joseph, and it's not the same Joseph from the Christmas story, all right? This Joseph that we're going to look at today was born about 1,500 years before Jesus. But in this chapter that we've been looking at that was written after Jesus, all right, was physically here anyway, we find this written about the Joseph we're going to talk about. It says this, by faith, so whatever Joseph does, it's due to faith, okay? So by faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites, the Jewish people, and gave directions concerning his bones. Now you read that, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. It doesn't seem like a big, like even though, like risky step of faith. Hey, I'm getting ready to die. When I die, don't bury me here in Egypt. Bury me in the promised land that God promised to us. So you gotta lean into this. The faith part that you have to catch here is this. One is, how did the Israelites, how did the Jewish people end up in Egypt, which is what we're gonna look at today. And then he makes reference to the Exodus. So the Exodus that Joseph refers to, where Moses, all right, Ben talked about this a couple weeks ago, Moses leads the people out of Egypt to the promised land. He makes reference to something that's not gonna happen for 400 years till after he's dead. He just knew. How? By faith, that God would keep his promise, which God did. And again, Ben unpacked that. You can go back and listen to it when Ben unpacked the story of Moses a couple weeks ago. So let's look at how the Jewish people ended up in Egypt, all right? That eventually they had to leave it. And more important, let's look at the role of Joseph and his faith that kind of played into that. So what I want to do today is I want to give you like a super, like in Jim's own words, abbreviated synopsis of the life of Joseph, which it takes up, and I really, really highly recommend you read this in your own Bible, right? It takes up like 13 chapters of the book of Genesis, and that's the very first book in the whole Bible. It's the easiest one to find. It's the front cover, Genesis, all right? And I'll be honest, here's why I like this story so much. This would make a great like mini-series that I would absolutely binge watch. I would. As a matter of fact, I've been told that the HBO series Game of Thrones, and I know some of you watched it, all right? But that what was going on there is the closest thing to capturing what life would have been like or felt like back in the early days of the Bible, in the days of Joseph. So as we're looking at Joseph, think that's what's going on, because this story has all that, all right? I mean, it has love and hate and sex and betrayal, family dysfunction, blood, lying, deception, famine, dungeons, kings, military, dream interpretation. I mean, other than actual dragons, this is the perfect miniseries, right? It has it all right? So the condensed version of Joseph's life, and again, I'm gonna warn you, I'm gonna stop several times through this, okay? And here's why. Because over the last year of my life, many of the circumstances and emotions that Joseph ran into, I've run into. And I'll bet as you listen to this, you're gonna say, me too. You have too, right? So here we go, right? And again, read this on your own sometime this week. So the story of Joseph begins, it starts in Genesis chapter 37. It actually starts with his dad. His dad's name is Jacob, and later Jacob changed his name to Israel, which is where the nation gets its name. And Jacob has 12 sons by 4 different women, which is a very interesting Thanksgiving, right? Anyway, so Joseph is the youngest at this point in the story, and his mom's name is Rachel, who is Jacob's favorite wife. And therefore, Jacob makes no secret that Joseph is his favorite son, which, as you can imagine, goes over great with the rest of the family, right? So dad loves Joseph, and doesn't make any secret about it. Gives him like presents that he didn't give the other 11 boys, all right? Gives him a coat of many colors. Maybe you've heard of that. But everybody else in the family pretty much hates Joseph, all right? And I'm gonna be honest with you, when we pick up this story, Joseph is a 17-year-old, bit of a punk, all right? He walks around with his new coat on. He goes out and spies on his brother, then goes back and narks to his dad. Hey, you know what our brothers did, all right? So they don't really like him. And he doesn't do himself any favors. Like one day at dinner, he like stands up, ding, 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 can I have your attention, all right? And he announces, I had a dream, all right? And in this dream, all my brothers bowed down to me. And then the next day, if that wasn't enough, he has another dream and he says, hey, I had another dream where not just my brothers bowed down to me, but my mom and dad are on their knees in front of me. Could you pass the potatoes? right? It doesn't go out well, right? Even if it's true, which is gonna happen, all right? It's not really building family unity, right? So one day, all right, dad sends Joseph out. All the other brothers are out in the field working, but not Joseph, all right? Sends him out to check on his brothers. They're taking care of livestock. They see Joseph coming from a distance. They have a little brother family meeting, and they take a vote. This is what happens. They said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." Okay? Great family. All right. Now, one of the brothers, Reuben, all right, he has an attack of conscience, right, and convinces them, no, we shouldn't shed blood. Let's just throw him in an empty well and let's let him die on his own. Reuben's actually planning on secretly coming back and rescuing him. But Reuben leaves for a little while, and while Reuben is gone, some slave traders come by. So the brothers say, let's make some money, all right? And they sell Joseph to some guys heading for Egypt. They take that fancy coat of Joseph's, they rip it up, they cover it all in blood, they take it home, and they go, Dad, it's horrible, all right? A wild animal ate Joseph, sorry. I'll say it once again. Or I'll say it once, and I'll say it several times throughout this talk. Not fair. Not fair, right? I mean, he's a 17-year-old punk, but come on. Not fair. The second thing I'd say is, are you feeling better about your family? Because I really am, all right? Because this one is jacked up. And that's just the beginning. That's just the first chapter of Joseph's life, all right? So we're going to skip over the next chapter, and you can skip over the next chapter too, because it's kind of weird. It has really stuff in it that has incestuous sex. It has prostitutes. It has a dude spilling his seed on the ground. Yuck, all right? And go ask your mom or dad what that means. Anyway, you read that on your own. Let's get to the next chapter, okay? All right, so the slave traders go down to Egypt, and they sell Joseph to a man named Potiphar, who is like captain of Pharaoh's personal guard. He's kind of like the head of the secret service for Pharaoh. And Joseph becomes a slave in Potiphar's house. Now, I want to show you something, and I want you to hold on to it and file it away because we're going to come back to it. Look at this. It says, this underlined part especially, the Lord was with Joseph. Remember that. The Lord was with Joseph, and Joseph became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master, Potiphar. All right, so in a short time, Joseph, because the Lord's with him, whatever that means, all right, Joseph is put in charge of all of Potiphar's estate. He runs everything, and life's looking up, okay? But then comes a little twist in the story. It says this, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. I almost said Jim, but that would have been arrogant. Anyway, so now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife, Potiphar's wife, cast her eyes on Joseph and said, straight up, lie with me, okay? Are you following this? All right, this is not a shy woman, all right? General Potiphar's wife has the hots for 17-year-old Joseph and wants to have sex with him while hubby is away. Again, time out. People can say all they want. They can deny it. They can sanitize it. They can clean it up. But there are big sections of the Bible that are absolutely rated R or worse. But on a good note, Joseph looks back at her and he refuses. He says, thank you. I couldn't do this, not to Potiphar and not to God, so I'm very flattered, but thank you, no. But this woman, she doesn't give up. Right? She basically comes after him over and over. One time she tries to pull his clothes off of him. He slips out of his outer garment and he runs. But now Mrs. Potiphar, she's mad and she's embarrassed. So she accuses Joseph of trying to rape her. Tells her husband, and General Potiphar has Joseph thrown into Pharaoh's dungeon. I'm going to say it again. That's not fair. You ever had anybody accuse you of something? You're like, I didn't do that. But you got busted anyway. But here's another phrase that comes up again. Here it is. Familiar, right? But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper, the warden of the prison. And so eventually, in a short time, Joseph is pretty much running the prison now for the warden. But I want to take a time out. I want to go look back at that phrase we've seen twice. I want to look at this. The Lord was with Joseph. And I'm just going to say, doesn't feel like it, right? Betrayed by his family, beaten, thrown in a well, sold into slavery, falsely accused of rape, thrown into a prison. I'll be honest with you, okay? It doesn't feel like the Lord is anywhere in the neighborhood, right? It feels like the Lord has totally abandoned Joseph and he's on his own, right? You ever been there? Life sucks and it's unfair. Where's God now? Ever felt like that? I have. So I'm looking at that, I'm going, okay, I gotta figure this out. I started tearing that phrase apart, and it actually translates, I geeked out on the Hebrew, all right? It actually translates out of the Hebrew this way: the Lord was against Joseph, which at first makes sense given what's going on, except it doesn't really seem consistent with what we know to be true about God. So I said, I gotta figure this out, and I dug in a little further, and the word against there actually means, ready? Like right up against, like leaning against. Like propping up, as in, I got your back. I'll hold you up. I'll hold you together. So we could really translate this verse this way. But the Lord was in the pit, and the Lord was in the prison with Joseph. And the Lord was holding him up, and the Lord was holding him together. Joseph was leaning against God, and God, in spite of the appearance of the circumstances, had Joseph's back. Hang on to that. So while Joseph's in prison, two of Pharaoh's servants from the palace, they're thrown into the same dungeon. And while they're there, they have these dreams. And they ask Joseph if he could interpret the dreams for them. And then God gives Joseph the ability to interpret dreams and tells them what they mean, which is this. He looks at these two guys and says, one of you is going to be executed and one will be reinstated. And then Joseph says this to the guy who's going to be reinstated: hey, when you get out, don't forget about me, because I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. Both dreams come true, but the reinstated guy forgets about Joseph. Not fair. You ever had anybody looking, I promise, and as soon as they're gone, they're just gone. 2 more years go by, and one night over the palace, Pharaoh has a dream, but nobody can tell him what it means. And then the reinstated servant has one of those, oh, shoot moments, and raises his hand and goes, so I might know a guy. And they go to the prison, they send for Joseph. Joseph comes back, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Here's the dream, Pharaoh. There's gonna be the next 7 years, the harvest is gonna be amazing and plentiful. But it'll be followed by 7 years of drought and famine, and you need to get ready. He actually gives Pharaoh some advice. You should find a wise man and put him over all the preparations, because I'm telling you, God has told me this is fixed. It's gonna happen. Now look at this next part. There's a little twist. Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people, all the Egyptian people, shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Wow, all right? Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge of preparations. In just like a few verses, all right, half a chapter, he's gone from wrongly accused and convicted felon rapist to second in power to Pharaoh in Egypt. You got to catch this, all right? That happened 13 years after the day that he's thrown in a pit and sold into slavery by his brothers. And I'll give you that. Well, this is a good day, all right? 13 years have gone by, and you don't get those back. So from that point on, 7 more years go by, and just as predicted, there's 7 years of great harvest, and then after that 7 years, the famine finally hits that entire part of the world, and then 2 years into that 7 years, so if you're doing math, all right, now 22 years, right, after Joseph gets thrown into the well, guess who shows up to buy food? Joseph's brothers. Because Egypt is the only place in that part of the world that has food stored up. And they walk in the room, and Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize Joseph because they think he's either a slave or by now he's dead. So I'm going to call another timeout. If you were Joseph, what would you be feeling right now? Because in front of you are the people, the brothers, that ruined your life. What would you do? Because sitting in that well and then sitting in that prison cell, I promise, I would have been thinking about this. If I ever get a chance, if I ever see those guys again, I know what I'm going to do. Ever been there? And this is one of the reasons why I think I love Joseph so much, because he messes with them. I was going to say a little bit, but he messes with them a lot. First, he only speaks in Egyptian through an interpreter, but he knows exactly what they're saying, so he eavesdrops on their conversations, which is how he finds out that after he was sold off, his mom had another baby, and he has a younger brother named Benjamin, all right? They also, and he listens in on this, they have this conversation amongst themselves, how they know this is God punishing us for what we did to our brother many years ago, and then they start arguing with one another. I told you so, we shouldn't have done it. I never wanted to do it in the first place, all right? And Joseph's listening to all of it. Finally, Joseph's had enough. He looks at them, accuses them of being spies, has them thrown into jail for 3 days. Then he brings them back after kind of messing with their heads for a little bit, and he says, I'm gonna make a deal with you, all right? Leave one of your brothers here, and then go back and get that younger brother, my brother, right? And then come back, or I'll have you all killed. And they're like, yes, sir. Yeah, okay, yes, sir, and they agree. And so Joseph messes with them. As they leave, and they load up their donkeys with grain, Joseph has his servants put all the money back in the bags that they paid for, which about halfway home, they find the money and they're like, oh no, we can't go back because now we'll be like executed for being thieves. So they go back anyway. They say, well, but we left our brother back there. So they go back, they get their younger brother, they bring him back, and Joseph messes with them some more. Now, why do you think he did that? Now, I can't prove this, but here's what, if he's like me, I think he's wrestling with, what am I gonna do? At least twice in the story, when he's having interactions with his brothers, he has to leave the room and close himself in another room, but the whole palace can still hear him crying and screaming. I think he's on an emotional roller coaster ride because he has this choice. He has the power and the position to choose to do whatever he wants to do to the people who ruined his life. Again, what would you do? Right? Eventually, back to the story, eventually Joseph kicks everybody out of the room except his brothers. He says, come here, look at this. Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Right? That has to take your breath. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, straight up, all right? That's probably not my response, all right? Because if you really dig into that, that would be like the biggest demonstration of grace and forgiveness outside of Jesus I can ever imagine, right? I'm your brother that you sold into slavery and you ruined my life. Remember that, all right? But don't be angry with yourself. Don't beat yourself up. God brought me here years ago so that I could save you today. What? And again, well, this is the choice that Joseph made based on his trust and faith in God that got him into Hebrews chapter 11. Please don't minimize what had to be going on in his head or think that he looked at his brothers and like, oh, shucks, guys, all right? Don't worry about it. It's all good. Right? All worked out in the end. God's faithful, right? And I agree. That is true. God is faithful. But think about it. If Joseph is a normal human being like you and me, that we're supposed to read the Bible and be able to relate to that, listen, there had to be some kind of tug of war going on inside of him, right? Do I go with what God is telling me to do based on my level of faith and trust in him? Or based on the horrible things they did to me? Based on what they took away from me, that I can't ever get that back. Based on the years of imaginary conversations I've rehearsed in my head while I'm sitting in pits and prison cells. Do I take matters into my own hands? Do I make them pay for what they did to me? Right? Listen, hey, brothers, God may be faithful and worked it all out, but payback's gonna be rough, right? It's a tug of war. Eventually, the brothers go back and they get Joseph's father and the rest of the family, and they all come back to Egypt. This is how the Jewish people ended up in Egypt. They lived there because there was no food anywhere else. But then a few chapters after that, Joseph's father, Jacob, he dies, and the brothers kind of have a panic moment going, okay, now that dad is dead, he's gonna pay us back for what we did. So they proactively come to him, and they fall on their knees in front of him, which is a dream come true, right? And they beg for forgiveness. Here's his response. Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? Am I God? No, I'm not God. As for you, and this is so important, look, as for you, you meant evil against me. He calls it out. Hang on to that. You did evil against me, but God meant it or used it for good to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. Don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. And say it again. That's not fair, right? Doesn't feel fair unless you're those brothers and they're like, thank you for not giving us what is fair. So let's go back to the question I've asked a whole bunch of times during this talk, all right? Except I'm going to change it from what would you do to, how about this? What are you going to do? Here's what I mean by that. I don't mean to be depressing, but if you haven't faced what is or feels like betrayal and attack from the closest, like the people that you should have been able to trust the most in your life, well, I hope I'm wrong. It's a matter of time. So how can you say that? Happened to Joseph, happened to Jesus, it's happened to me, and if it hasn't already, it's mostly likely someday going to happen to you. And what will you do then? And the answer is, well, it will be connected to your level of trust and faith in God. And you will make a choice. And it won't be an easy choice. And I'll bet it will be a roller coaster of a ride to get there. And you probably won't get it 100% right, whatever you decide to do. But make no mistake about it, while God runs the whole universe, you will be the one who decides what you're going to do now. And it will be the hardest but most important choice you may ever make in your entire life. And here's why. Because the rest of your life rides on that choice. This is true. I know it's true. Here's why this story lands so close to me and why I saved it for last. Because 13 months ago, I got thrown in a well. I walked into a meeting on a Tuesday morning, and I was told that I was going to be placed on 6-month sabbatical, not someday, that day. I was told, right, and that's not right. I heard, I don't know what they said. This is what I heard, all right? I heard, you're unhealthy, you're sick, you're broken, nobody trusts you anymore, you're not a good leader, and we don't want you. And I couldn't breathe. I even said it in that meeting, guys, stop. Just be honest with me, right? Listen, just give me a little severance and I'll disappear. I'll just go away. Over the next, couple hours and the next couple of days, I found out that there were surveys taken. I didn't really understand, right? There were multiple meetings weeks before this meeting on that Tuesday morning where an entire plan was put in place. And I felt like I got ambushed. I felt like I got screwed over. From the people, the closest friends and coworkers that I had spent over a decade with, I thought I could love and trust them. I'll be honest with you. What I thought in that moment, losing my job's not the most painful part. It's the people who did it to me, right? Crushed me. I looked at one guy and went, part of me died that day. And I'll be honest with you, the guy I said that to was at the top of the list. His name was Paul Bruner. He's my number 2 in charge. And before anybody blows a gasket or blows up Paul's phone, all right, he and I crafted this talk together. We're good, right? Later, we'll get back to that. Later, it felt like the same people. It wasn't enough that they came after me. I felt like they went after some of the closest, most important people in my life. And I remember about a week into this whole sabbatical thing, Paul Andrews, who was the elder, and I don't know if he got voted on or he picked the short straw. I don't know, but he was kind of like my handler during those 6 months. We were in my living room. I'm sitting on my couch, and I was going off as only I can, because when most of all my emotions come out as anger, right? And he just listened. He's so good. He just listened. And finally, when I could let him speak, he finally said this. He says, okay, Jim, let's say you're right. Let's say they did it wrong. Let's say they did it for all the wrong reasons. And then he said this, quoted the Bible at me. He says, but what they meant for evil, God can use for good. I heard that so many times over the next 6 months, the next year, and my answer was back then, and still is the same. Great, I believe it. And I can say, God did use sabbatical a lot, all right? He did, he will, all right? But, here's a big but here, right? It's still not okay to throw people away or throw people in wells, and that's true. I won't change on that. See, what happened to Joseph and what happened to me, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this, what happened to you shouldn't have happened. Or at least it shouldn't have happened the way that it happened. Even though you can look back on those events like looking back and see how God was faithful and how God did keep his promise. Okay, great. It still hurt and it wasn't fair. I just want to honor that it shouldn't have happened, but you're still here and you're still alive. Which leaves you and Joseph and me with a huge question. Okay, but what are we going to do now? See, we can't change what happened. Wouldn't that be awesome? We can't undo what happened. And there's nothing that we could do to them or that they could offer to do in our direction that would make it right or replace what was taken from us. So what are we going to do now? So here's what I'm going to go with. Based on who I believe Jesus to be, based on how he has kept his promises to me in the past, when I've absolutely just screwed up everything, and based on, I actually believe he will keep his promise to give me the strength to do what needs to be done and to begin to heal and focus on all the good that has happened since then. I choose forgiveness. I choose forgiveness. And I've asked them to forgive me. Because if I don't, that pain and anger will destroy my life and rob me of much more than what I felt like I lost on that day. And I'll be honest with you, I want peace and healing more than I want revenge and payback. See, Jesus taught us over and over and over that forgiving other people is more about us and has very little to do with them, because lack of forgiveness doesn't affect them or change them at all, but it will lock us up in a cage of bitterness and anger, and we won't get out. So what's going on in your head? What's yours? It's not sabbatical, it's something else. And I'll bet you have been having those same imaginary conversations in your head that I did and Joseph did. That tug of war between faith says I ought to do this, and the other side that's going, but I feel and I want to do something different. And Jesus even understands. Like, when Jesus was on trial and being attacked over and over and over, they were mocking him, like, save yourself. He actually looked back at him, and this is what he said to him. Do you not think that I could call 10,000 angels if I wanted to get out of this? Which means to me, he thought about it. Crossed his mind. He didn't choose that, but it was right there available to him. Hey, time out again. I want to acknowledge something, all right? The first thing is this. I'm not letting myself off the hook for the many things that I did wrong and needed to ask forgiveness for, right? Nor am I trying to point fingers at other people, Paul or anybody else, about the horrible things that they did to me, all right? I have asked for and been given forgiveness for many things. Please hear that, okay? But that's not what this talk is about. My point is this, about what you have to work through when you are sitting in the middle of something that feels on the receiving end as life-changingly horrible, and it's this, all right? It's the biggest, most painful things that hit your life. Here's what you got to figure out. Forgiveness and healing isn't going to be easy or come all at once. It's not just say a prayer and it's over. It's not true. For me, it was several months before I even entertained the idea of forgiveness over payback. All I wanted was payback. For a long time, I didn't even want to keep on. I didn't want to forgive. But eventually, I got there. Well, I'm going to correct that. I'm going to try to be honest. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Because every once in a while, something will happen. And it's like someone pulled my trigger, and all that pain and all that emotion, all those memories come rushing back. Listen, I tell you that, I just want to acknowledge that, folks, that's reality. It happens. Happened to me. It's probably going to be similar to you. I'll give you one of the most recent ones, all right? So a week ago, I had some buddies over, and we were doing some landscaping with some of my friends, and they don't really understand everything that was going on, but one of them asked me, hey, Jim, do you have to go back with the people who screwed you over? And I was looking and went, yeah, I do, all right? And then he said, I couldn't do it. Hey, how do you do it? And I just looked down, I was quiet for a little bit. And finally I looked up and I said, Mike, what's my alternative? See, I knew in the back of my mind, in the many discussions I had with some really important men in my life and with my counselor and with Robin, all right, if this one broken relationship between me and Paul, if that couldn't heal, then our staff and our church would never heal. So the stakes are pretty high. Here's the other part about it. I really love Paul. And I know he loves me, which is why the whole thing hurts so much, right? And looking back, everybody involved, we all wish we could have done it differently. And we're all trying to trust Jesus, and Jesus is keeping his promise, and it's getting better, and those relationships are healing. But God didn't make it for us. We had to make a choice. What am I going to do now? You know, I've heard a lot of people say this. Somebody said to me on my porch the other day, hey, you know, Jim, I've had a rough past, but I wouldn't change anything because it made me the person I am today. I get it. I would. There are a lot of things in my past that I would change if I could. But then, so a while back, actually a few years ago, I was sitting on my back porch just going over some stuff before I went off to that Crucible Men's Retreat where you deal with a lot of brokenness and stuff. And I was sitting on my back porch all by myself, and I was reflecting over some of the really, really hard, unfair, literally abusive things that had happened to me earlier in my life. And I had an aha moment, all right? And these aha moments, they can't come while you're in the middle of the really hard, unfair, abusive pit or prison that you're in. But using the rearview mirror, looking back, here was my aha moment. This is tough. If the only way to get here, and let me define here for you. If the only way to have Robin be my wife, have Jordan and Allie be my kids, be married to these awesome people, to have these grandkids, to have the friendships that I have in my life now, to have the honor of leading Flatirons Church, at least for a season, that's what here is. If the only way to get here is to have what happened to me happen, I would sign up again. I'd do it again. And I never thought I'd say that. But the only way that I or you or Joseph can eventually say anything close to that is because we're able to, by faith, say that looking back in the pit and in the prison, in the divorce, in the cancer, while you were being abused, the betrayal, when your heart was being trashed, the not fair, the loss of the most important part of your life, and it was taken by the most important people in your life. If you're able to look back and say that the Lord was with me, Lord had my back, held me together. He was faithful to me, or I wouldn't be here. And I want to say this before I wrap this up. If you're not there today, it's all right. It's all right. It takes a lot of time, right? I'm just going to close with a prayer that maybe someday you can say it. The Lord is with me. And I'm going to say this too, right? He's with you now. You just don't feel him. You don't see him. You can't hear him, but he's there. Someday it'll make sense. I know. Let's pray. So, Lord, I started with a prayer that said, I think that you have the ability to draw the right people to hear the right message at the right time. And I think for some of us right now, that moment is now. And so, in spite of what we feel, we're going to go to faith. And we're going to ask you, will you be with me? Will you get right up against me, God? Because if not, I will fall apart and I'll fall down. And I'll just die down here in this pit. You know what every story is of every person listening to my voice right now. And you're in that with them. You really are. And so like we're about to sing, we got to look up. There's no one like you. We got to look back and see you're faithful. We look ahead and just know we can walk through this life with you. We don't have to be afraid. I believe that, or I wouldn't be here. So I just pray this all, and I give you thanks in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Of this world, I will lay them at your feet. Surrender every anxious thought for perfect peace, your perfect peace. All the loved ones I hold dear, all my hopes and dreams and all my fears, I will choose to trust your name in everything, with everything. I will look up, for there is none above you, and I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. I will take you at your word, for Jesus, you have taken hold of me. All my life is in your hands. You are my strength. You are my strength. Tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. I will look back and see that you are faithful. I look ahead, believing you are able, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord.
Of peace, perfect healer, all my life, all my cares on you, King of kings, mighty Savior, all my life, all my cares on you, Prince of peace, perfect healer, all my life, all my cares on you, King of kings, mighty Savior, all my life, all my cares on you, yeah. My life, my Jesus, on you.
I will look up, for there is none above you. I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. I will look back and see that you are faithful. I look ahead, believing you are able, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. All right, Flatirons, thank you so much for joining us wherever you're at. We're so happy you tuned in. We hope to see you next week. Same time, same place. We'll see you later.